The world began to believe in dream homes because of them. But what if there was a much more tragic reality hidden beneath every breathtaking revelation? How did two of HGTV's biggest stars become well known while discreetly taking on challenges that most people had never seen? Stay with us, because you will be left wondering about everything you believed to be true after hearing their secret story. An unforgettable game in Colorado. Two individuals in the picturesque state of Colorado were on quite different journeys in 2013. Texas native Keith Bynum has already established himself in the cutthroat field of interior design. He started a design firm that expanded into 3 profitable retail locations before selling it and looking for his next challenge. He had an advantage in both strategy and creativity, thanks to his MBA in entrepreneurial development, which made him as adept at starting a company as he was at designing stunning environments. Conversely, Evan Thomas, who was raised in South Dakota, was heavily involved in the academic community. His days as a physics PhD candidate at the University of Colorado, Boulder, were devoted to scientific problem-solving, equations, and research. Although he had no professional interest in renovation or design, his methodical approach and logical reasoning would eventually prove to be the ideal match for Keith's artistic vision. It was Match.com that brought them together. Evans was the only other man on the platform who felt even vaguely like him, according to Keith, who has frequently stated that he stood out right away. Their initial conversations demonstrated a unique intellectual and artistic bond in addition to love possibilities. Keith discovered someone in Evan who could strike a balance between his lofty ideals and realistic, workable answers. Evan discovered in Keith a person who might unlock a realm of creativity and potential outside of the confines of academia. Their bond only grew stronger when they finally met. Discussions regarding their private lives soon turned to common goals. They found a shared passion for remodeling, design, and the excitement of making something out of nothing. What began as casual conversations quickly turned into real teamwork. Reimagining a small space, repainting a room, or updating old furniture were some of their first joint efforts. Evan would figure out the materials, proportions, and techniques required to make the daring, unorthodox concepts that Keith would sketch out a reality. They had a rhythm that was instinctive. Weekends were frequently spent searching salvage yards, estate sales, and thrift stores seeking overlooked items with untapped promise. Once, they purchased a weathered dining table for less than $50, restored it with fresh details and stain, and made it the focal point of a customer's house. After Keith modified the frame and Evan meticulously rewired an ancient light fixture that had been abandoned in a dusty back room, it became a visually arresting discussion starter. As friends realized how talented they were together, they would often seek for assistance in remodeling areas in their own houses. These requests served as practice for far larger initiatives in the future. They progressed from being part-time renovators to two individuals who were unsure if this love could be pursued full-time. However, there were difficulties. Finding reasonably priced homes to remodel became more challenging due to Colorado's escalating real estate costs, and the market seemed too constrained for them to expand as much as they would have liked. They had no clear plan for where they may expand, although they frequently talked about the prospect. The pivotal moment occurred late one evening when Keith was browsing Instagram when he came on a tale that caught his eye. 10 houses were bought by a Detroit house flipper who made over $1 million from them. The pictures of the before and after were astounding. In contrast to Colorado, the cost of purchasing these homes was surprisingly low, and dilapidated homes were converted into lively, habitable areas. For Keith, it was more than just financial gain. It was the notion of contributing to the revitalization of a city that had endured a great deal while doing it in a way that was both fashionable and reasonably priced. After he shared the idea with Evan, their light-hearted conversations quickly evolved into important plans. In a matter of weeks, they were contemplating the possibility of completely relocating and entering a new market. Detroit was a symbol of possibility, the kind that doesn't come along very often, but it also symbolized risk. What actions did Evan and Keith take to make their audacious concept a reality? And what did they find when they got to a city that had as many opportunities as obstacles? Stay tuned to find out. Keith Bynum was consumed by thoughts of the Instagram post he had seen, which ranged from modest endeavors to a daring plunge. His imagination was filled with pictures of Detroit houses, once deserted and empty, now alive and full of possibilities. His attention was drawn to more than simply the outward change. The economics was the reason. In Colorado, purchasing a house to remodel required a sizable down payment. You could buy whole houses in Detroit for the price of a second-hand automobile. In addition to being motivational, the tale of a flipper in the Motor City who earned over $1 million presented a challenge. Would he and Evan be able to duplicate that level of success while adding their own unique, creative touch? He made the decision to inquire. Heath purchased a ticket to Detroit for his 30th birthday. It was an easy strategy. Visit the city, look around the neighborhoods, and decide if this was a market worth going after. He discovered more than he could have imagined. Keith visited a dozen houses in a few days. Some were so dilapidated that it felt risky to enter them at all. Years of neglect, sagging flooring, and collapsed ceilings. But he recognized possibilities beneath the deterioration. Every property has a tale to tell about its past and its potential future. The amount of work required did not scare him. He was actually excited by the challenge. He was drawn to a house. It was little, dilapidated, and desperately in need of repair. It would have been a foolish investment for many. It was the ideal place for Keith to start. He called Evan and explained everything: the building, the area, the opportunities. Evan was certain that this would be their first Detroit assignment before the end of the talk. After purchasing the property, they got to work right away. The remodeling was extensive. New surprises, concealed damage behind walls, old electrical wiring, and plumbing problems appeared every day, but they met each challenge head-on. Keith concentrated on the design, aiming for a modern, clean aesthetic while preserving the house's unique features. Evan took care of the problem-solving and building, making Keith's ideas a reality. The change was finished in a month. Bright open spaces had replaced the dingy, decaying interior. Clean lines and practical layouts replaced the old kitchen. Once disregarded, the facade was revitalized with vegetation and color that embraced rather than alienated neighbors. The profit was a definite indication that they were onto something when the house sold for $64,000. It wasn't a simple lucky flip. It demonstrated that their blend of ingenuity, effectiveness, and astute financial planning could flourish in Detroit's market. Both of them felt a fire ignited by the event. They made the decision to give it their all and moved from Colorado to Detroit to devote themselves full-time to home flipping. The choice wasn't simple. They were leaving behind a stable lifestyle, acquaintances, and familiar surroundings. However, they both felt that the chance was greater than the danger. Relocating to Detroit marked a sea change. They had never lived in a metropolis like this before. Every street displayed its unique blend of history, adversity, and resiliency. While some blocks featured rows of deserted residences, others were lined with immaculately kept homes. Despite the stark difference, there remained a great deal of room for regeneration. With a budget of less than $45,000, Keith and Evan created high-impact modifications as they settled in, establishing a renovation style that would eventually become their signature. They demonstrated that quality and beauty didn't have to be sacrificed for price. Locals began to notice their work, and soon a much larger audience was taking notice. The couple's ability to revitalize Detroit houses without driving away first-time purchasers caught the attention of HGTV. The network contacted them with a concept for a program that would track their initiatives through to completion. Although Keith and Evan were intrigued, they were unaware of how drastically their lives would be altered by this new chapter. How did two untrained renovators transform a local passion project into a nationwide phenomenon that would draw millions of viewers? Join us as we discover Constructing Bargain Block. After completing multiple Detroit flips, Keith and Evan's notoriety began to spread outside of the communities. Residents realized they had a talent for identifying the most dilapidated houses in the city and transforming them into lively, habitable areas. Their strategy was unique, as it didn't focus on pursuing affluent consumers. The goal was to design fashionable yet reasonably priced homes that were within the means of first-time homebuyers. Not just among locals, but also among the real estate and design communities, word got out fast. Because of the inventiveness infused into each detail, the pair's refurbishment projects, which were frequently finished for less than $45,000, were generating a lot of attention. Evan's careful construction and structural issue solving made sure every makeover was as useful as it was beautiful, while Keith's striking color selections, creative wall treatments, and distinctive furnishings became conversation starters. HGTV producers were drawn to its combination of design and functionality. The network was looking for fresh ideas for home remodeling programs and wanted to include people who could really relate to the audience. After being captivated by their narrative and astonished by the visual outcomes of their work, a producer contacted Keith and Evan. The idea was straightforward but effective: a television show that tracked them as they worked within tight financial constraints to buy, remodel, and sell Detroit homes to first-time purchasers. Evan and Keith were initially hesitant. They had never appeared on television before, so the thought of cameras watching them everywhere was unsettling. But they also recognized the opportunity to showcase Detroit's continuo. After they agreed, everything proceeded swiftly. The idea was expanded upon by HGTV into the entire Bargain Block television series. The name perfectly captured their goal of revitalizing underappreciated areas, one home at a time, by adding beauty, affordability, and vitality. The production team spotted Keith and Evan's chemistry on screen almost instantly when filming started in Detroit. Keith's design style was reflected in his on-camera demeanor. Evan's calm, steady presence helped steer projects through unavoidable difficulties and provide practical insights to balance Keith's artistic flourishes. Evan was lively, inventive, and prepared to take risks. The response to the show's April 2021 launch was tremendous. During its first season, over 20 million people watched because of the hosts' genuineness and the noticeable difference their work made in the lives of actual people. The pair's ability to save properties that others had written off and frequently transform them in a short of weeks captivated viewers. One of the show's defining characteristics is Keith's designs. He regularly used vintage items, repurposed materials, and hand-painted art walls to give each house a unique character. Evan, on the other hand, tackled the difficulties that viewers hardly ever saw on ordinary remodeling programs. Reconstructing dangerous staircases, fixing deteriorating foundations, and making sure every project complied with safety regulations without going over budget. The fact that Bargain Block wasn't about striving for perfection was one of its charms. Instead of being sterile copies of current fashions, homes were refurbished to be practical, reasonably priced, and distinctive. Because of the personal touches, they seemed cozy and lived in, which appealed to viewers who were sick of generic makeovers. More episodes were produced as a result of the first season's popularity, and Bargain Block quickly rose to prominence on HGTV. Keith and Evans were relatable due to their friendly demeanors. In the design industry, however, they were respected for their skill set and work ethic. But even while the show made them famous across the country, it also brought with it additional demands, such as stricter deadlines, bigger audiences, and the ongoing pressure to surpass their previous endeavor. Nevertheless, their collaboration remained solid, rooted in the equilibrium and trust they had established since their first Colorado assignments. Their joint love had developed into a full-fledged career that would lead them to unexpected places. However, they stayed dedicated to doing things their own way, both on and off the screen, in spite of the recognition and opportunity. Why have Keith and Evan decided to stay engaged without actually getting married, even after years of dating and a rising public profile? Join us to learn. Love without a wedding. Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas had established a strong life together long before Bargain Block attracted millions of fans. Their relationship was only made stronger by years of common experiences, which included anything from remodeling homes to managing businesses and relocating to a new location. However, they were still followed by one question from both interviewers and supporters. When would they eventually tie the knot? They have consistently responded, not very soon. Despite being engaged for years, neither of them feels the need to decide on a wedding date. They regard their relationship as complete, without a formal or ceremonial seal of approval. Not because they question their love. They believe that marriage is a decision rather than a requirement. Keith has been open about their justification. He frequently clarifies that their schedules are already very taxing. It would be extremely stressful to organize a wedding on top of overseeing several renovation projects, shooting for HGTV, and growing their business endeavors. Instead of planning an event to meet social expectations, they believe that time is better spent on their personal hobbies and leisure. Keith's viewpoint is enhanced by Evans. He believes that the reality of their life together is unaffected by the lack of a marriage certificate. They live together, pursue jobs together, and work together to overcome obstacles. They saw themselves as emotionally wed in all significant respects. A piece of paper cannot reinforce the foundation of their relationship, which is based on mutual respect, trust, and common objectives. That's not to say they haven't thought about getting married. They have made jokes about the financial advantages of getting married, particularly in relation to tax deductions, in a few lighthearted interviews. Despite their sense of humor, they have never thought that the freedom to define their partnership as they saw fit outweighed those pragmatic benefits. Another tacit form of resistance has been this independence. Keith and Evan have both experienced times when their relationship was not accepted by society. In part, their decision to remain engaged without getting married is a declaration that love doesn't have to follow a set formula in order to be genuine or enduring. Their fans have been talking a lot about their position. Some others respect their self-assurance in defying convention, viewing it as a powerful illustration of living a genuine life. Others are still interested in the possibility of surprising everyone with a ceremony, possibly even one that is broadcast on television. However, for the time being, Keith and Evans appear to be happy with the status quo. The lack of wedding planning hasn't affected their romantic relationship in their personal lives. Whether it's an impromptu weekend getaway, an anniversary meal, or just completing a particularly difficult project together, they still find ways to commemorate significant occasions. The everyday interactions, like sharing coffee in the morning before filming, are what give them a bond. The peaceful discussions while going over architectural blueprints and the joy of witnessing their team's work transform an unfinished house into a home. Couples who similarly feel under pressure to take the conventional route will find great resonance in this viewpoint. There is no one correct method to commit to someone, and the strongest relationships are characterized by the individuals involved rather than by ceremonial practices, as demonstrated by Keith and Evan. As their notoriety increases, the interest persists. So does a conjecture that they will exchange vows on camera at some point. Following their familiar pattern, Keith and Evan appear unconcerned. One is based on cooperation, understanding, and the autonomy to decide what is most important to them. What hard realities and personal hardships influenced Keith and Evan's resolve to live true to themselves in their relationships and careers? Let us tell you about encountering prejudice and discovering a sense of acceptance. Even though Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas are now praised for their charm and inventiveness, they have faced challenges along the way. Both guys had to negotiate situations where it wasn't always safe or acceptable to be who they were before the television cameras, before Detroit, and before Bargain Block. Keith felt at home throughout his formative years in Texas, but he was also exposed to a subtle bias that would later come to lie. He hadn't experienced overt homophobia for the majority of his life until he started working in construction. There, the friendship frequently concealed jagged edges, and lighthearted banter occasionally carried strong bias. He was constantly reminded that he was viewed as strange by the remarks, jokes, and chilly reception. Keith's coming out was the pivotal moment. His family's response was heartbreaking. Rather than encouragement, he received rejection. He was emotionally scarred by being rejected by his loved ones, but it also gave him a newfound sense of fortitude. It taught him the importance of forming a chosen family and surrounding himself with individuals who accepted rather than challenged who he was. Evans's path was not without its difficulties. Despite being founded on intelligence and study, his academic communities in South Dakota and Colorado were not impervious to presumptions and silent judgments. Subtle types of exclusion can be just as isolating in male-dominated, competitive environments as overt discrimination. Even though they were challenging, these experiences gave him a quiet strength and a great deal of empathy for anyone who had to face similar challenges. The prejudice didn't miraculously go away when the two started working together on remodeling and construction projects. Certain cultural norms have traditionally governed the trades. Furthermore, Keith and Evan were aware that as an openly gay couple, they would face suspicion and occasionally even animosity from their peers and clientele. However, they also understood that their art would be more powerful than any stereotype. Their relocation to Detroit was a significant shift. They sensed anything unusual as soon as they started talking to locals. They were welcomed by Detroit's historically and culturally diverse communities in a manner they had never encountered before. Individuality was more likely to be praised than chastised in the city because of its multiculturalism and resilience, which reflected their own. They discovered more than simply reasonably priced homes to flip in Detroit. They discovered a community. Their neighbors greeted them. Their vision was well received by clients, and partnerships with nearby companies flourished. Their ingenuity and resolve to use their platform for change were both stimulated by the acceptance they experienced. Keith and Evan started publicly promoting greater inclusivity in the building business through Bargain Block. They made sure that individuals with a range of identities, histories, and skill levels had the chance to develop by hiring a diverse team. They made deliberate personnel decisions in an effort to establish the kind of encouraging work atmosphere they had desired early in their careers. They also started speaking out against television depiction. They served as concrete evidence that skill and professionalism are unrelated to conforming to antiquated stereotypes. Keith and Evan's presence was potent for viewers who hardly ever saw themselves represented in the remodeling and design industry. Although it took some time, the transition from experiencing prejudice to feeling like they belonged changed the way they conducted both their personal and professional life. They got more than simply a new market from Detroit. It reminded them of the transformational power of the appropriate setting and provided them a newfound sense of self-worth. However, not all of the experiences in the spotlight were good. They prospered in their home base, but the television industry had its own set of obstacles that would put their forbearance and morals to the test in unexpected ways. What if the environment they helped create for reality TV turned out to be much less dazzling than what fans saw on screen? You might be surprised by the response. The evil side of reality TV. Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas recognized the opportunity to explore the boundaries of their creativity when they decided to join the demanding world of Rock the Block. On paper, the format of the show was simple. In order to increase the worth of each property, there are 4 teams, 4 similar houses, and a number of themed challenges. In actuality, it would put their design abilities to the test on a much larger scale. The mood was charged from the moment they stepped onto the set. Teams evaluated one another. Producers hurried about with headsets and clipboards, and there appeared to be camera teams everywhere at once. Winning a title wasn't the only goal for Keith and Evan. The goal was to demonstrate that they could compete with some of the most well-known HGTV personalities while maintaining their own aesthetic. Creating a luxurious meditation area with a sophisticated washroom was one of their most memorable tasks. Both of them jumped right into the challenge. Keith had an image of a cozy, calming retreat with lots of earthy hues and organic textures. Evan made sure the spaces flowed naturally by paying close attention to structural features. The outcome was a room where worry seemed to melt away, a calm setting with thoughtful accents. However, their confidence started to falter as the judging was held. Although their effort received recognition for its originality and skill, another team won. They told themselves that competition can be unpredictable, so they prepared to take on the next task despite their disappointment. However, uneasiness started to creep in as the filming went on. A few judgments were erratic, and some criticisms appeared strangely prepared. Keith and Evan have experienced enough work-related scenarios to know when something wasn't quite right. Evan made the decision to speak up once the season ended. He accused the chief producers of rigging the tournament in an open social media post that he later removed. He was harsh in his remarks, accusing them of being professional liars and raising the possibility that the judges' decisions were impacted more by hidden agendas than by the caliber of the work. Keith openly endorsed Evan's claims while making his own nuanced yet incisive remarks. He portrayed their time on Rock the Block as being far from the fair, merit-based competition that fans thought it was, and he hinted at other revelations that they would eventually disclose. The consequences of their allegations struck a chord with viewers. While reality TV has often been accused of prioritizing drama over authenticity, hearing it from two well-liked HGTV celebrities carries weight. While some fans praised the show, arguing that competition usually leaves some feeling short-changed, others argued online about whether Rock the Block's outcomes were staged. The event turned into a warning for Keith and Evan. They had entered the tournament excited to demonstrate their talents, only to depart questioning the integrity of the process. The tension between what the cameras filmed and what truly happened behind the scenes left them disillusioned with certain facets of the television industry. Nevertheless, they refused to let the bad event to define their professional lives. They instead focused their energies on their own show, where they were in charge of how their work was shown. And before long, Bargain Block itself would transport them far from Detroit's streets and end into a metropolis full of very different opportunities. How would Keith and Evan's creativity be tested in ways they had never encountered before by a new setting with its own history and culture? The Deep South had the solution: new ventures and New Orleans. For Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas, the news that Bargain Block was going to New Orleans was a game changer. A city of pastel facades, elaborate balconies, and homes steeped in centuries of history. They were set to exchange Detroit's urban grime for a city whose architecture is inextricably linked to its spirit. Keith saw it as an opportunity to learn more about design with a historical foundation. He researched shotgun homes and Creole townhouses, searching antique stores for genuine textiles and fittings that captured the spirit of the place. While maintaining the home's original elegance, Evan concentrated on fixing the warped floors and damaged beams brought on by years of humidity. Cooperation became crucial. They collaborated with regional craftspeople, including carpenters who used traditional joinery, painters who were adept at the city's multi-hued color schemes, and ironworkers who replicated elaborate railings. Their vision and the artistry of New Orleans artists were combined in each project. They started a new business while filming, a line of home decor and furnishings that made its market debut in Las Vegas. Fans were able to bring a bit of their flair home with the collection's bold yet approachable designs, which were inspired by their TV endeavors. Their time and energy were put to the test as they juggled a developing retail brand with renovations in a city rich in culture. However, it also forced them to explore new avenues as lifestyle designers. However, stories about their personal lives started to eclipse their most recent achievements just as their careers were taking off. What was the real story behind the most frequent myth regarding the personal lives of Keith and Evans? And when curiosity became conjecture, how did they react? Riches, charity, and heritage. Beyond the small screen, Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas have ventured into retail, design, and real estate. Their projected $2 million net worth was fueled by the success of Bargain Block, which created a number of revenue sources, including real estate investments, their 9 Design Plus home store in Detroit, a home furnishings line, and possible brand agreements. They have goals beyond money, though. The duo has always prioritized giving back to the areas where they work. They collaborated with neighborhood groups in Detroit to provide affordable housing, converting dilapidated buildings into secure, comfortable residences for people who may otherwise be priced out. Their makeovers are more than just eye-catching. Their deliberate accessibility demonstrates their dedication to economic inclusivity. Additionally, they support diversity in the building sector by employing teams with a range of backgrounds and advancing equality through their HGTV platform. Evans's rigorous approach guarantees that these efforts are conducted methodically, while Keith's own experiences with discrimination have made them quite personal. Their work demonstrates that design can be both profitable and meaningful by fusing social impact with commercial success. They have a similar philosophy. They enhance lives, not just spaces, whether they are renovating a Detroit home or launching a new furniture line. Furthermore, their expanding impact indicates that their legacy will be evaluated not just by the homes they have renovated, but also by the communities they have assisted in re-establishing. The end. Did the hardships and obstacles that Keith Bynum and Evan Thomas had to overcome in order for Bargain Block to succeed surprise you? What struck you as the most moving aspect of their journey? Leave a comment below with your opinions.